Hey everyone, it's MG from Computer Science 294. We are going to look at the advanced HTML presentation for this video. The next video is going to be a little more practical, but this video is just literally going to be going through the slides and kind of discussing some of the information in the slides as displayed. And then again, in the second part of this presentation, another video or a different video, we're going to go through all the practical assignments in this video and sort of see them adjacent to this video. So let's go ahead and knock it out. So again, advanced HTML, take one. Let's talk about the display value of certain elements, right? So HTML elements have different default display values based on what type of elements they are. And when we talk about display value, we think about that as in how the element is displayed on the web page, whether or not it's displayed by itself separately or inline or just not at all. And we have three main default display values: block, inline, and then none. So let's go ahead and go through it. So when we talk about block level elements, we refer to these as full width elements. Effectively, they stretch as far left and right as is allowed by their container. So if you're in the body tag, or the body, you put it inside your body tag, it's a full width element, then it's going to stretch all the way to the right and all the way to the left of the window, of the screen. They start in a new line. So we see these already with our paragraph tags and with table elements. All of the header elements are like this, and all of the list elements that we know about, the unordered list, ordered list, and description list, as well as all those list items, the LIs, the DTs, and the DDs, as well as things that we haven't messed with yet, forms and divs. So, and they stretch as far left and right as possible, as in the container, and they start on a new line. For inline elements, they're limited with elements. They only take up as much space as needed. So, they stay on the line where they're called, where they're created. And we see those already with image tags, with anchor tags, for say like a URL or something, for the page breaks or the strong, any of those emphasis sort of expressionary, elements. So strong, italicized, underline, emphasis, abbreviation, code, KBD and SAMP as well, and then span, which we haven't talked about, but we're going to. And then there are the none elements. These are the elements that their default display value is set to none. They're not technically displayed, or visually rather displayed at all, but they are technically displayed to the browser and the scripting engine. And these are used to structure and manipulate other elements. So we see these in the style tags, which we're going to get to in a minute, and then the meta tags, which we're also going to get to in a minute. And again, these are big deal elements, but we don't really ever see them visually. We see them technically or programmatically, and they do serve a very important purpose. Let's look at some block style elements. We can see that in our body tag of this example HTML, we say this is some text, and then I start a paragraph. This is some text in a paragraph. I end that paragraph, and then I say in a header 5, this is header 5. I end that, and then I create an unordered list with 2 list items in it. And it's all on one line, from the T in this all the way to the closing tag of the UL. That's all on one line, so it doesn't look like it's on one line on the screen, but if you were to type this out or copy this out and paste it in brackets, it would be just this long, obnoxious line. That's why Morty is so petrified right now. But we see that when we render it down, each one of these, and I'm using the inspect element to look at the rendered down versions of these, we see that they take up the same width. And that they start on a new line. They put some padding above and padding below based on the elements, because those are all full width or block style elements. So it doesn't matter that they were all on one line. They understood themselves appropriately, and they took up all of that space. When we look at inline styles, we can see that we got some underlines as well as some emphasis and strong elements to kind of represent different things. We see that on the same line we've got an ahref, an anchor tag with a link, and we see that we've got an image tag that looks like it's going to some logo, some black logo PNG from Southeastern's website. When we render this down, we see that these are all on the same line. Even it doesn't really matter how they were configured or how they were sort of written in the HTML source, but because they're all inline style elements, they're all on the same line. And we can see that in each version of this sort of rendered out thing, all the elements are on the same line there as well. So we didn't talk about these two tags that I thought were pretty important. I gave them their own separate set of HTML. It's span and div, and that refers to the inline element span and then the block style element div. These are incredibly useful general purpose elements that are there sort of to provide grouping and style containerization for inline elements if it's a span element, or then block style elements for divs. And we can see this when we go to when we look at our example HTML. And again, if you ever have any questions, you don't understand it, and you can't really Google it, make sure you always gotta, this is good advice, you always should email me if you don't understand it, but first try to figure it out yourself. So in this example HTML, we see that we have a div with style equal border with 1 pixel solid black, and we put some example text inside the div, and then we start a span element. We say span, and we're going to make this style equal to a background color green and then a foreground color white, so the text is going to be white for us. So, and then we say this style text is styled, and we close the span, we put more text just to show that we're not styled anymore, and then we put it inside, or we close out that div. When we render this down, we see that things are starting to get a little better for us style wise, because now we can start to see some containerization. We can see that there is some example text inside of this div, and then the internal text that was surrounded in the span is totally is totally styled the right way, which is exactly how we wanted it to be. And we can even see that later whenever we go ahead and we try to put our paragraph tags in there with more text, that not only is that on its own line because it's a full width element, it did that inside of the div, which is really nice. Still inside that styled bordered div though. And then we were talking about the none element, the meta tag. So metadata is stored in the meta tag, and metadata is really just data about the data. When we say data about the data, what we're referring to is it's not necessarily specific data that you see or that is interpreted or that is rendered, but it is important because it's data about that data, right? So this isn't something that is HTML page content, but it's content or data about the content. So it could be a description about the web page, it could be an author information or entry about the page, it could be what type of encoding, character encoding, UTF-8 or whatever, Unicode encoding for the page, a viewport, which is incredibly important. We're going to get to that in a minute. The header substitutions, depending on if you have different ways you want to configure that, and then a ton of other things. So they have to go in the head section. Any meta tag has to go in the head section, and they're always going to be a name value pair. So for instance, meta name equals author, that's the actual meta tag that we're talking about, and then content will equal MG or whatever. That's the value for the name, which is author. So meta name equals author. I was previously mentioning viewport, which was incredibly important. Viewport controls how the entire page is rendered based off of the device that it's on. So whenever you look at a page on a cell phone or a tablet or on a PlayStation or an Xbox or on a computer or a laptop or anything like that, any different size device, viewport can help sort of standardize the way the width is referred to and transparently passed between the web server and the website and the actual device. And we do that by saying web or meta name equal viewport, and the content is width device width equals device width, initial scale equals 1. And effectively, this is important, you should put this in every web page that you build from now on, because it's going to set up the immediate configuration, the initial configuration on that device to work with a plethora of devices. Really, really important. So here's some example HTML with some meta in there. We got character set UTF-8. We've got basic description, CMPS 294 example HTML. We have author, me, and then we have our viewport. And then just a p tag and body to say business as usual down here. When we render this down and we look at it, we can see that, again, meta is a none style element. It's hidden visually. But if we were to run this through a search engine, or if we were to structure it a little bit more with more meta in there and we were to analyze it, we'd see that data is still there. We still get it. It's just not important to us visually. But again, on the backside, structurally, it's very important. When we talk about style, the first assignment I think we all admit it was a little frustrating because frequently I would tell you, no, don't do it the right way. Even if you knew what the right way was, don't do it the right way. Do it the way that I was trying to, that I was kind of trying to push you in, using individual inline element styles for all those P elements. And that was because we were going to work towards this style block, but I didn't want to start there because I feel like there's some appreciation necessary. There's some, greater appreciation whenever you do things arguably the wrong way, but at least the more frustrating way. And I hope that we can achieve that, that sentiment is not lost on everyone. So when we previously looked at styles, we kind of discovered like styles are the way that we change the appearance of different types of elements. Whenever we are using an element and we want that element to be more than just a black and white piece of text or a black and white block or something, we can put different styles, and those styles are actually, the CSS styling. Pardon the illiterate S, but anyway, those are actual CSS styles that we're just applying in line to those elements. And that's not really the way we want to do it, because chances are we're not going to have a unique element every time, and we're really copy and pasting a lot of code around as if we were using unique elements. With inline style changes, it's very difficult to make a lot of changes very quickly, or to change the overall look and style of the entire site or web page very quickly, because everything's individual. So what we do is we define what's called a style block in the head section of the entire site, or on the page rather. Inside that style block, we put all the relevant rules and styles and everything for whatever elements that we wanted. The way we format this is we call it element, say P, and then we give the style name value pair. So something like, P, and then inside a curly brackets or curly braces, background dash color colon white or orange or something. We have to follow the same style rules, for instance, semicolon separated, but now what we're going to see in the practical application of this is that with brackets, or with any halfway decent editor, we're going to get a lot of sort of code intelligence or code intelligence that's going to predict what we want. We're going to get sort of our nice inline code prediction that's really great. It's also going to look a little bit nicer. We're going to do some syntax formatting for us, which is nice, or syntax highlighting, which is nice. And remember, multiple rules can be used. It's not just one rule and that's it. So in this example, we see that we have in our style block, we've got, and all this is in the head section of the HTML. We see style P, and then inside of curly brackets, background color dark green, colors white. We're going to justify the content center. We're going to center and text align it, or center the text, and then we're going to put a 2-pixel dashed yellow border around any P tag. Now in the body of that same HTML where we put the style, we're going to have 3 separate P tags, P elements. We're going to say business as usual, testing, 1, 2, 3. I love it when a plan comes together. And whenever we look at the rendered version of that, again, it's not beautiful because I'm not designing very well right now, but we can see that we had to make very few changes. The style block is what is doing all of the hard work. We just wrote basic code. We're effectively giving all of the stylization, all the styling to the style block where it should be for now. I know everyone's going to argue, no, it should be in a CSS file. Well, yeah, eventually. We're going to work on that in a future thing. But for now, we're just taking all of those styles and we're moving it to the top of the page, and we're putting it in our style block in the head section, so that we can then just write basic HTML on the bottom and not worry about styling. So if we were to look back at the style block, if I decided, well, dark green really isn't a good background color, let's go ahead and make it dark orange or dark red or black. You can come back here and you can change the one section where it says background color dark green, change that to background color black or dark orange or whatever, and it would change it for every P element in your HTML, which is exactly what we want to do. We make one change or a minimal number of changes, and we affect a maximum number of elements with that, which is exactly what we want to do. All right, so I'm not going to do a golden fold impression because it gets loud. And anyway, I might splice in some of the audio.
We're going to be dealing with some real serious stuff today. You might have heard of it.
So when we talk about HTML attributes, style's already an attribute that we deal with. We already talk about style, but some of the most helpful attributes are simple things like ID and class, and they're so important to understand what their differences are. Classes are effectively groups of objects. IDs are effectively the specific identifiers of those objects, of different elements. So you should have one ID of an element, and they should all be different and preferably unique. And then you can have multiple elements part of the same class, sort of a group. So when we look at elements, we know that they can have style. For instance, this H1 tag has style color equal red. So whatever text is in there will be red. We can also give them individual IDs. So we could say H1 ID equals, and then we give it something, in this case main header, and then we give it some style. But we can also, instead of ID, or even in conjunction with ID, we can give it a class. So we can say class equal something, and we can group those different associations together by class. And what we can do is we can actually define this in our style guide. We can define this based off of different classes and different IDs. So for instance, we have div.container. The dot is important there, width, border, margin, padding. We have p.centered, which simply just centers it. And then we've got hashtag biggest, hashtag bigger, hashtag big. Now, when we look down at and these are all separate, IDs and classes with styles. If we look down in our actual element, our actual HTML body, we see that we've got div class equals container. Let's go back a slide real quick and let's look. Div.container, it correlates to div class equals container. So anywhere where the class is equal to container, that is a div. It's going to have these styles, set to it. Same thing with p class equals centered. Okay, we looked at p.centered is text dash align equals center. We're going to center that text. But then we also see ID equals biggest, bigger, and big. And when we go back, we look at, hashtag biggest, bigger, and big. All right, these have different font size, font weights to them. So we're combining classes and IDs so that we can get some sort of combination of class and IDs. And then for good measure, we've got a good solid normal p tag at the bottom. When we look at this rendered down, we're starting to actually get some pretty nice expressive sort of styling. It's centered in the center of the page. It's not super giant, super big. We've got 3 or 4 different styles that's kind of getting added together, additive styles. And we can see that it's starting to become a nice website. Now again, it's not beautiful because I'm not a designer, but the div is acting as a container. All the elements are centered inside of that div for all the p tags, with the exception of the one that's not. But notice that it's inheriting the initial state from the div. That's really a critical understanding. It's a critical concept because as we progress into HTML5 and a few other sort of semantic-based tags, it's important to understand that inheritance is a thing. We're inheriting the previous position and the previous container. If we put a container inside of a container, we're going to inherit the innermost container. Everything, all the styles that we're dealing with are going to either be relative or absolute or whatever to those inner and outer containers. So we're just gonna have to. I'll try to watch out for it whenever we do some practical application in class or in another presentation. I'll try to make it very well known when that happens. The class and ID aren't the only ones, though. Aren't the only HTML attributes. There are a ton of HTML attributes. For instance, lang, style, title, tab index. So whenever you're on the page, you hit tab, it'll go to the next tab index. You can define all of that. Some attributes aren't global. Those were all global: class, ID, language, style. Those are all global, but some are very specific to some elements. For instance, image has width and height and source, alternative, sizes, source set. It's got its own little thing. Ordered list, reversed, start, type. We've got a lot of different things. You're going to have to kind of Google around and search for the appropriate attributes based on the tags that you're using, the elements that you're using. It's not. I don't expect anyone to just memorize that, but also at the same time, don't expect me to try to teach you all of them. It's not helpful. You're going to have to figure out what element you want to use, and then kind of look at the specific tags or the specific attributes behind that element in order to figure out how to best display that element. But they aren't just for show, for instance. They're not just for show at all. There are event attributes that allow scripts to manipulate page objects. HTML event attributes. We'll take care of that in the JavaScript presentation, but I'm letting you know that attributes aren't just visual or aren't just, I guess, meta. There's manipulative sort of HTML attributes on the back end that we will eventually get to. I'm going to stop this presentation here because it's already been almost 20 minutes or a little over 20 minutes. So I don't want to like make it so long that you don't really listen anymore. Take what we've gone over and try to start applying it before the next video, before the practical application video. Go ahead and redo assignment 1 using style blocks if you didn't do that. Just try it out. If you have some questions about this, please send me an email, mg@sclu.edu. Watch out for the practical application video, and then also watch out for the follow-up where we're going to talk about semantics in HTML5 and a few other things, HTML forms, stuff like that. So just stand by for that. Thank you again. Email me if you have any questions. I'll see you either in class or the next video.